Welcome, everyone, to the inaugural episode of the 2024-2025 school year RipRapYap podcast.
Ooh.
I am one of your hosts, Peter Smith.
Yeah, and I'm Anna Lynch.
And this is the first of hopefully many episodes this year we'll be having of this podcast where we talk about literary things, fun things, I don't know, whatever we want, really.
Yeah.
No one can stop us. But here for our first episode of this year, we have the wonderful Caesar Gonzalez. Do you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Caesar Gonzalez. I publish under the name CR Gonzalez because my name's too long, apparently. I just graduated from the MFA of Poetry here at Cal State Long Beach. I don't want to step on any of the questions later, but working on some stuff now. I ran RipRap last year. Yeah. And I was part of the staff the year before that. I was editor of poetry the year before that. I'm just a writer.
Just a writer.
Yeah, you're like the perfect person to have on the first episode.
Yeah. And I did the podcast before.
Oh my gosh,
perfect. Yeah. So we had the podcast going before. I wasn't great at maintaining it. We did like 5 episodes, but like solid 5 episodes.
That'll be our goal. We'll try to get to 5. All right, so you mentioned you were obviously co-head editor of RipRap last year. Do you want to talk about how that was?
I did it with my friend Jessica Mendoza, who is a brilliant genius and just really, really great person. But to kind of head RipRap was, it was a little bit intense because you're in charge of a group of people, but very much like running a classroom. And I've been thinking about this recently, like the ways in which you make yourself vulnerable as being the head of a classroom. Yeah. And it's like tenfold when you're talking about like issues of like taste and like sensitivity around subject matter, because when people write poetry, they get vulnerable.
Yeah.
And so running RipRap, I had to think a lot about the things we would accept and not accept. You had to think about like not being too tyrannical and saying like, I don't want this in here because I don't understand it or it's not my taste. But also your name is like at the very top of the list when they open that book. So it's representative of like what you think and what you like. So I am putting like my name on it. So I had to be like judicious about like the things that I chose to be inside. But Jess, had a large say in it too, and I trusted her. So I was glad to be co-editor and have someone to like bounce off with my ideas about what should be inside. Like largely, she let me pick a lot of things, which I was grateful for because I can be like kind of stubborn and like I like what I like. But luckily, Jess had some strong opinions, and she's like, "That's definitely not going in," or "I really like this." And that was like my favorite part of the process. When I was a poetry editor, there were some things that I had to really fight to get inside of the magazine. And I think when it comes to poetry, it's all just so very subjective, and your taste varies so widely. And I think as long as anyone could like voice that opinion and really make a strong argument for a piece of work, I was willing to listen. So to go through that process as like being in charge and saying yes or no, like the power gets to your head.
Yeah.
But also it was really fun to like hear people like defend work that I just thought like wasn't going to fit, or maybe like didn't fit the theme. Because we did have a theme. I think you guys are going with no theme this year.
No
it's
theme,
a little hard.
Miscellaneous kind of.
Weird theme.
Yeah, for sure. Which is great. You're going to get more people probably submitting because of that.
Which is what we want.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. But yeah, it could be constricting, but like I work really well under like constrictions.
So,
I need that.
What was your theme last year, do you want to say?
Our theme was reconciliations, which came up like immediately. Like our first day of class, somebody dropped that. I can't remember who it was, but like reconciliations were like, there's so many ways to access that.
I think,
I think poetry in general is about reconciliation. I think even some people have problems admitting to themselves that they're poets, and that can be a reconciliation.
They're poets and they don't know it.
Yeah,
That's
most
really
definitely.
Funny.
I mean, I went through that process. You know what I mean? I didn't start writing poetry till like my mid-20s or something like that. I didn't know. So I think reconciliations and poetry were just like the perfect match.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't started writing poetry until recently, and shit, I'm 24. Is that mid-20s?
Yeah,
Yes,
no.
that is your mid-20s.
Yeah, I wrote
So-
my first poem at 24.
Yeah, so I wrote mine at 23 then, yeah.
Okay.
But, I don't know. I feel like, because I went in thinking that I'm just like, oh, I'm going to write short story fiction and nonfiction. That'll be all I do because that's fun. And I don't like poetry because that's weird.
Yeah.
And then, like, writing poetry, like, wait, this is kind of fun. You get to have fun with form. You can get what you want out of it, I think, as a medium, because you get to play around with form, with metaphor, a lot more directly than you can in, say, like, regular prose writing.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think it helps inform that kind of writing, because I've had pieces that have, like, were poems first and then become stories.
Or vice
I don't know
versa.
if you've
Or
had
vice
that.
versa,
Or vice versa,
yes.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. I was also a fiction writer. And then, like, I had people read my work. And I was doing pretty well as a fiction writer. I was getting published and read and stuff like that. But people kept on telling me, like, this is poetry. So I can't, like, write, like, a dead sentence. Like, and so that makes, like, the editing process grueling if you're writing long stories. And so I was like, I can't keep this pace.
Yeah.
I can't keep this pace where, like, every sentence is, like, packed with something. Like, I just could not, like, leave a sentence lying on the page without, like, meaning something more than what was on the page. And I was like, oh, let's try poetry.
Yeah.
Did that happen to you too, Peter? Is that why you moved from prose to poetry?
I didn't move from prose to poetry. I'm kind of
Didn't you just say that?
1
You did
foot
that?
in each pond. Is that an expression?
okay.
Yeah,
I don't
he's
know.
still doing the thing.
Where I feel like they facilitate each other. Like, when I can't sit down and write a story, I'll write poems for a while. And then I'll get it flowing, and I'll be, I like this idea, I like this motif. And then I'll go sit down and write a story, and then I'll just borrow lines from the poems I've written. And put them in there where they fit. And it
That's
kind of comes
lovely.
together. I don't know. That's just me.
Yeah. No, my approach is really different. I'm a prose writer. I'm in the MFA program for prose. But I'm also a poet. And so I totally understand the whole 1 foot in of each one.
Yeah.
But for me, like, when I write poetry, it's usually when, like you were saying, Caesar, with, like, a lot of, like, packed metaphor and feeling and high emotions. But when I write prose, it's, like, way more methodical, and it's like, oh, like, is there enough foreshadowing? Like, what's the plot doing? What are the characters doing? It's way more structured and way less, like,
I was never great
intense.
at setting up a story that way with plot and everything. My stories are always, like, more character-based.
Yeah.
Like, let's see what this character's doing. And it worked for me, but I just found it more interesting to write poetry because of line breaks. And I think, like, poetry
Yeah.
is line breaks, and line breaks are incredibly interesting to me.
I agree. Yeah, Peter just brought up that Red Wheelbarrow poem,
Oh,
and I love the
yeah.
line breaks in
The
that.
William Carlos Williams.
Yeah, excellent.
Yeah, but I don't know. That's interesting about plot, though, because I've also thought that, where it's like, that's honestly my least favorite part of writing a story, either fiction or nonfiction, is having plot.
What
And I
happens
think,
is the boringest part.
Honestly, yeah, because, okay, it's Hollywood, people, okay? You watch too many Transformers movies, and then you get in your head that, like, you have to go, get the Allspark to stop Megatron. But you don't need to do that in every story, really. I mean, there's a lot of great stories that don't really have plots, and like you said, they're just character-driven. And I think as long as characters interact and they grow,
Yeah.
that
no,
can do a
for
lot
sure.
of work.
Absolutely. And I'm a sucker for, like, a good plain plot,
Yeah.
but also I think I'm pretty avid cinephile, and usually when you ask me what, like, a movie it was about, I'm just, I don't know. But that character was really cool, huh?
Yeah, well, that's a good one, like Pulp Fiction. Like, that's like 3 half plots, and it's all characters.
Yeah.
Or I guess any Quentin Tarantino movie, I don't know.
Yeah, heavy character work.
Yeah.
Yeah, it gets me going.
Speaking of character work, what are you writing right now?
So I started working at a restaurant in the service industry. It's a bar restaurant 5 years ago to, like, get me through my undergrad and grad school. And so that kind of, like, got me through all of this, and I've been living, like, these dual lives of, like, being a student and working in a restaurant. So I started being inspired about the people that kind of go into a restaurant and it was like the same vulnerability I was talking about being in a classroom. Like, when you're facing a public that way, there's kind of a lot at stake that we don't think about, like sort of morally, and like you think about your principles a lot because when you work at a restaurant, people say things that you might be uncomfortable with, there's like it's just like kind of a toxic environment, and like there's these vicious cycles happening behind the scenes with like service industry workers, a lot of drug abuse and stuff like that. So I'm putting together a chapbook about that. It's called The Regulars.
I love it.
So it's kind of like paying homage to like this thing that got me through school and kind of inspired me. But like, it's just like this really, really insidious place, but also this place where like you provide for people and you serve people, which I love doing. Like I've worked most of my life in service of people, and I get a lot of joy out of that. And I don't feel like below anyone. I feel like it's an opportunity to like connect and really just make people happy. I mean, because I'm a food addict, and to like serve people food and like make their day that way is incredible to me, and I really like that connection. And I like it was a goal of mine to work in the service industry for a really long time, and I finally got to do it when I started going to college, and it's been like a really rewarding experience, but just like something that is just like there's really a lot at stake there, and it can make you feel really differently about yourself over time.
Oh, 100%. I also worked in restaurants all the way from my first year of undergrad to this summer before I came here to Cal State Long Beach.
Yes.
And I had a love-hate, a lot of hate, but definitely some love for food service, because when somebody appreciates you, there's nothing that feels as good as that.
Yeah.
But then when you're trying your best and then people still yell at you and they tell you that you're not good enough and they're like, why are you even here? You're horrible at your job, like stuff like that. You're just like, oh my gosh, are they right?
Yeah, it's the audacity.
It's very, like, it is very vulnerable to be in that position.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you just gotta eat shit.
Yeah, because like your job is to like please people, so
Exactly.
you're putting yourself out there in a way, and like naturally, I'm not a people pleaser.
Yeah.
Like I can care less. Like I'm really good at not caring what people think of me.
That's a good
great.
quality.
Yeah.
And so like you're like you have to switch it on then, and like really I have to put myself in that headspace where like, oh, I care about people think. I want them to have a good experience.
Yeah.
And so I've made a lot of friends that way, but like sometimes it's just jarring the things that people say to you.
Yeah.
And before this I worked at the airport at the international terminal.
I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, people are like ready to hate you when they
the
get there.
airport, they already
Were
wanna
you
die,
like in airport restaurant or just
Security.
like, you were
Oh,
patting people
no.
down and like looking at passports?
Yeah, so it was an international terminal, so I came like face to face with like very like wealthy people, like most celebrities you can think of. I've met them.
Oh my gosh.
And these people were just so dismissive, and like when someone who's worth like $1 billion tells you like you're worth nothing, you're like, it's kind of true in this situation.
I would cry.
Well, they're not on this podcast, so
Ain't that the truth?
Where are they now?
yeah.
In a movie.
So I've spent a long time thinking about those interactions, and interactions like social interactions, interpersonal relationships is something that I wrote a lot about anyway. And so like naturally it came to this head, and like I am working on a larger piece of like a book of poems, more autobiographical and more going into my childhood.
Yeah.
But when I came across this, it happened in workshop. I just wrote a couple poems about working at the restaurant, got a lot of good reactions. And so I was like, well, this is the thing first. Like, this is what I got to get out first because like it's kind of like on fire inside of me right now.
Yeah.
And so it's like I'm writing these poems about the people who work there, which like have these longer lines and more like kind of like warmer, more flowery language. And then I write about regulars, which are like these really interesting, they're all on the left margin, like 2-beat, 3-beat lines. And so like it's all cut up. Yeah. And it's kind of supposed to imitate this kind of like pitter patter of like being behind a bar and like having to think about what you're saying next, or like having very short conversations. I'm sorry if you can hear me snapping. And so like it's like sort of conceptual in that way.
No, I love
That sounds amazing. Yeah, the
people don't
rhythm.
pay enough attention to form, I think, and that's important. I don't know, but you're saying like that was one of your first poems for a workshop that you did?
No, actually, for this was one of my last ones. So like in the last semester, in the last few weeks, because I had tried so many things. Like I know you two are just like getting started in the MFA, but like toward the end, you're going to be tired of workshop and like tired of yourself. And so you're going to try things, which I think is like where the real work begins. So like I was writing just like my average everyday poems. Like we got over the trauma poems, and then I started writing about just like ordinary things I would see on the bus or whatever. And then I started writing sonnets, and I did sonnets for weeks.
I love that.
And then when I was done with sonnets, I started doing like these real 2-beat, 3-beat lines, and I was like, this is really interesting to me because if a word is like 4 syllables long, you have to like cut it up in interesting ways, and like you get new things out of that, you know? And that's like the beauty of line breaks. So I started writing these really short poems, and I started writing about working at the restaurant and like just getting lost in this poem and like kind of losing your place because the lines are so short. And I started cutting up words in really interesting ways. Started getting really exciting to me, and people were having like really interesting reactions. Like some people really hated it. Like this is like kind of amateur, and you're just being like stupid and
I don't like your poem. You know.
Yeah. Basically, what's just like a fair assessment because it can be pretty stupid, but it was really interesting to me and still is.
Yeah, that's good. I know. I get a lot of inspiration also from my food service jobs.
Mm-hmm. Do you work in the service industry?
I did. I quit recently, but I was working at a pizza place for 2 years. And what you were saying like about it being rewarding when like people were nice to you is true because like most of the time it was pretty bad. People were mean, but then I'd go and deliver a pizza to a kid's birthday party, and then be like, they'd come and like try to hug my leg. Like, wow, this is really nice.
That's adorable.
But hours were terrible, so I quit.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
One of my first stories that I wrote was about my job before that, which I absolutely hated. Which was I was a baker at Sprouts.
I love Sprouts.
Which
Yeah,
I would wake
and
up
baking.
Yeah, no, I like bread. Okay.
Yeah.
You can tell if you see me. I like bread. But no, I'd wake up at 3:30 every morning to get there at 4.
Uh-huh.
And this is when I was still in community college, and they were scheduling me 7 days a week for this, so I'd like be done and go to classes until 4 o'clock.
That's
so
hard.
It's a 12-hour day.
That's really hard.
And management was mean. So one of my first stories, it wasn't directly about this, but it was just about a guy who was basically a disgruntled grocery store employee who hated his life and hated his manager. And that was about it. There wasn't really
Seems
much
autobiographical.
Kind of it was. I mean, whose perspective better to write about than my own? And you know what?
Right what you know.
Yeah. So Sprouts treats their employees badly. Don't go
Yeah,
there.
no, I'm not surprised. They have the best vegan cookies.
Oh, I spent so much time making vegan cookies.
A lot of
Yeah,
pain
I'm
went into
vegan.
those cookies.
I'm vegan, so I eat the fruits of your labor.
All the bread there is just frozen and reheated.
She could
So-
taste your tears.
Yeah.
No, I cried a lot there. Anyways.
That's so funny that we've all had like service industry jobs.
I feel
Caesar,
like-
you seem like
yeah.
you have more positive things to say about your service industry job than Peter and I.
I am like an adaptable person, so I kind
Yeah.
of make the best. And plus, like I'm a people person, and like, I mean, my wife makes fun of me for like talking about myself this way, but like people love me there,
Well,
and like
good.
I have like a lot of regulars that'll come in and they treat me like very nicely, and I've gone out with these people and I'll like hang out and get dinner with these people. Like I'm really interested in knowing about people, and I think that's what has like helped me write poetry. Is
Yeah.
that like I look at people and I want to see the best in them, and like that's something that I grew into, you know, because like I used to be like a cynical person that like kind of didn't want to talk to many people, and then when I realized like, oh, that's a defense mechanism because I think the world is a bad place. Like I outgrew that, you know.
Good for you.
And that comes with like getting older.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I'm just like an old guy now, which is like a beautiful thing. And it's been like a really wonderful experience. Like I turned 37 this year, and like
Happy birthday.
Oh, no, I was just saying, I don't look a day
Congratulations.
past 30.
Thank you. And like I think getting to this age has really just matured my view on like why people are the way they are, and like you get to some sort of like a deeper understanding of that, and like you're able to reach out like through that and past that, and like really welcome them into your life.
Yeah, that's cool. And I think also it's extremely hard to be a writer if you're a closed-off person. I mean,
Yeah.
or just not interact with. I don't know. I mean, that seems kind of obvious.
Yeah, I think like traditionally people have an idea of the writer as like some
Yeah.
kind of sort of like
Hermit. or
recluse.
something.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and it doesn't work.
No, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
You gotta
all
let
your
the-
stuff just turns out to be the same.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
got to let the world in.
Like all your stories end up being about like the walls of your apartment, and that's like, yeah, it's like, oh, the trash guy did it. That was
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah, or your cat.
Yeah. Anyways,
I have a question from the question list.
What's up?
It is, what are you afraid of? either broadly or in the context of writing? I'm more curious of in the context of writing, especially as you've talked about what you're working on and you seem really passionate about it.
In the context of writing, what am I afraid of? Well, I think everyone's afraid of the blank page. That's hard for everyone, I think. Obviously, just getting started. But, like, I've gotten pretty good at that. The MFA is good to, like, get you through that and learn how to work through that. It's just, like, exercise or any other thing that doesn't feel too great in the beginning. But more specifically in my case, I think I'm afraid... I think I'm afraid of, like, being dishonest with myself in my work and not saying what I mean to say.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll get started on a piece of poetry and I'll have an idea of what I want it to say, and by the end I was like, I don't think I was very honest with that, or like I don't think that's like really what I was trying to say with that. And I think with poetry, sometimes we want to pull punches and we don't like want to say the thing, either to like protect ourselves or people around us, because sometimes it can get intimate in that sense. And so like I'm like deeply afraid of like looking back at work and being like, man, that was a little dishonest, you know?
Yeah.
And I think we can all have that in us to like be dishonest with ourselves. And that's like not true to the thing that it is. Like that's not true to what poetry is, I think. I mean, I think, like, yes, we can make things up in poetry, and yes, that does have the potential to make it more interesting. And my poetry has become more interesting since I was like, hey, I could just, like, bullshit this.
Yeah,
like, I could just lie in this
fiction.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And, like, my poetry has become more interesting since, but, like, I think at the root of all the poems is, like, something that I really meant to say.
Yeah.
That's so important.
Yeah, so I think, like, being dishonest with myself and, like, with the work is, like, one of my biggest fears because I think sometimes that can happen unintentionally.
Yeah. I definitely feel that. And a lot of the things I write that I end up getting rid of or not continuing with are the things that I go write I write like 5,000 words and I realize, man, you know, none of this is really true to my experience. And it's harder to spot with like fiction, but with nonfiction, I'll be writing and be like, oh crap, you know, like I really want to lie about this.
Yeah, definitely.
But if I did, then it wouldn't be nonfiction. And why do I want to lie about this? Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, I think everyone, you know, naturally tells themselves lies or bends the truth more so about like who they are or what they think. And that comes out in writing. And I think one of the biggest boons to have as a writer is the ability to catch that when it happens and know that it will happen and correct for it, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think in a way we're like building our own myths, like to something
Mm-hmm.
we can live with, and like feel okay about ourselves, you know?
Yeah.
And there's things that, I mean, after, like I said, getting older, you look back and you're like, I'm not sure if that's true anymore. Like that thing that I kept on saying that I was is true anymore, you know? So I'm like a person that's constantly reassessing that, just over and over again. Like, is that thing still true? And I think like I mentioned earlier, like the cynicism, like the fact that I was a cynical person, like I just had to reassess, like, is that true anymore? Like, do I feel that way about the world? Do I think the world is like out to get me?
Yeah.
No, inherently not true. And then like, as a beginning poet, you like most people are into the same thing. And I think like, for my generation, it was kind of like Bukowski and like Fonte and stuff like that, or like dirty old white men. And like I was interested in writing about drugs and sex and
All the cool shit.
Yeah, exactly. And yes, like I did both, but like writing about them was just like not interesting to me.
Yeah.
And so like so like constant reassessment, you know.
Yeah, I get that.
I think that when you write something that's true, your reader can really feel that. And when you're writing something that maybe you're not being honest with yourself, they can also feel that you're holding back. And
Definitely.
the poem's not as strong as you know that it could be and that they know that it could be. Some of the most compelling pieces that I've read are autofiction pieces, and they're so vivid and so raw. And I think people who are literary readers anyway, people who want to read RipRap, people who are interested in what we do, are the kinds of people who want to read something raw and who want to feel like, wow, that was a real thing you went through. That was powerful.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really awesome that you recognize that as a fear, because we all want to be authentic.
Yeah, definitely. I think authenticity is the word for sure.
Yeah.
But I think just like I don't know. In my case, I think it's a little more complicated than just like authenticity.
Yeah.
Because like authenticity is like such a flimsy word for me. You know, like I don't know. I don't know what I mean to say here, but I think authenticity is like real flimsy, and to find that, like, even now, I don't know if any of my work is authentic.
Yeah.
But I know that it's true.
Because something being authentic means you can like verify it. And if it's all like a creative work, like you can say, oh, this is authentic, and something that's not like this wouldn't be authentic. But if you're creating it and it's all coming from your point of view, you can't really say that it is.
I think that's what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
Like when I think of like authentic food, like I'm Mexican, you know, like I'm Mexican, and like people are like, oh, this food was authentic, and I was like, well, it's not authentic to me because my mom didn't cook it this way. You know what I mean? So like I like really struggle with the word authentic, and like it's like a silly argument in my own head.
No, I think you're right. I'll redact the word authentic.
No,
we'll come up with something better.
No, I didn't mean to shoot down your word.
That's totally fine.
But like in terms of Mexican food, it just means like they use lard in the beans.
Yeah.
Like that's the most authentic thing you can do.
Yeah.
Got me hungry. Yeah.
As a vegan, I try to not eat beans that have lard in them, but
They're good.
They
They're
do
so
taste
good. Oh my
good.
God. I
Yeah.
had some yesterday.
okay. Let's see what else is on this question list. Peter, do you want to ask one?
I can ask a question. These are the questions prepared by our other lovely members of RipRap.
This is what they wanted to know about you.
Did you make these all together? It's like
a lot of people submitted their own questions that they wanted to do.
That's
for
really
this
nice.
Podcast. Yeah, so getting them involved.
I love how democratic that is.
Well, they had to do it whether they liked it or not. That's not true. They didn't have to do it.
They didn't have to do it. I didn't do it, a single one. I was like, I'll just be here.
Here's a good question. When did you start getting interested in poetry or literature? Or like, what got you interested?
I've always been interested in literature as far as I can remember. Like, since I was a kid, I would read like Goosebumps books. I was like Goosebumps addict. Yeah, like Catcher in the Rye in high school, which I still read every now and then because it just like changes all the time. But writing, really, I started in like maybe second, third grade. I was just like only interested in like exploring my own imagination, and like I'm of the age where like video games were like coming up and like they were ultra violent, so I was like interested in like ultra violent stories.
Like Doom or whatever?
Doom. Yeah, Doom, exactly. And Mortal Kombat. And I've always been kind of like a creative person, and as a kid I was ultra creative. I was always like drawing, and so my dad still has these drawings, and it's like Mortal Kombat characters like ripping each other's heads off.
Amazing.
Like spines like hanging off of heads and stuff
exploding.
Yeah, exactly. And I was like making these in the third grade, and they're like, hell yeah, I'm gonna keep this.
Nice.
Very literary.
Yeah, so I would write stories instead of doing my homework, and luckily enough, in the third grade specifically, I had a teacher who would kind of embrace that, and he's like, I want to read your story to the class. And like I kind of got like that first high of being like, oh, I did something and somebody's like listening to it now. But that was like really the spark of it, and just growing up with that and like kind of having that interest has always been a thing. And I've been in and out of writing. There's been years where I didn't write anything. I once went 3 years without writing a single thing. So like I go in and out of this stuff. And now I'm like more serious about it, but it's always been like sort of at the center of my life. Like I love literature and movies. Like I just love art in all those ways, and I try to participate in any way that I can. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. I had a similar experience in elementary school. I think it was in the fourth grade. We all wrote stories that were supposed to be like takes on Cinderella.
Yeah.
And everyone else was doing like lame stuff where it's like gender swap version. I was like, okay, that's a bit cliche, you guys. So I decided to do, I think it was called like Swendabebla and the Magical Kangaroo. I don't know where I came up with that.
I love it.
Might have had lead poisoning as a kid. I don't know. But then they had like, I didn't know this was going to happen, but they had like a company come to the school that does plays, and they picked out like stories from each class. And mine was one of the ones that got selected, so they adapted the story that I wrote into a play, and they did it.
Oh, that's really cool.
So
That's really cool.
Yeah. So that was my like first experience with writing. I'm like, oh shit, this is fun to do.
Yeah.
You said,
like
"Oh shit," as a fourth grader.
Yeah, I got in trouble.
I definitely did. I would cuss so much as a kid. It was ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it's kind of gross. Now that I hear kids cuss, it's just like it makes my skin crawl. I was like, yeah, I'm an old man for sure.
Yeah, those damn kids these days.
I was just roasting you, Peter.
Yeah.
But just like finding that person who would nurture that, you know,
Yeah.
and like that environment that would nurture that, like widely, I think that's what's the problem with public schools is that there's kids like me out there, and I didn't get good grades, you know what I mean? Because I was
Yeah,
more interested
of
in
course.
art. It's like, but like if I had found that one person that would like nurture that, and I did in the third grade, but other than that, you don't get that a lot.
Yeah.
And people don't know to nurture that. Like if you're a kid who's like interested in things like that, like it's always bright. Oh, that kid's bright. You know, like they can't like participate, but they're real bright. I know they got a lot going on. But like widely, there was nobody in my life that told me like art was a thing that you could do, and that it's interesting and that it's cool. You know, and I grew up in East LA, so those schools especially don't pay attention to that stuff.
Where in East LA did you grow up?
The Whittier Boulevard sign. I don't know if you know where that is, but I grew up 1 block away from the Whittier Boulevard sign.
Okay.
Yeah, so like it's on Arizona and 6th Street, right near Garfield High School.
Okay. I know what 6th Street is.
Yeah. So if you ever seen the movie Stand and Deliver, right where that movie takes place.
Okay.
That's pretty cool.
I was hoping I'd know, but
Yeah, I'm only really familiar with the West LA, so
Yeah, I am not. I avoid West LA at all costs. I hate traffic.
I live there. I drove from there this morning.
That is
It
rough.
was terrible. It took me almost an hour to get here. I was worried I was going to be late.
Damn, I feel so
But-
sorry for you.
you were the
It's
opposite
okay.
of late, Peter.
I was a
That
little.
worked out.
Well, if you're not early, you're late, and if you're on time, you're late. That's. I don't know. I like to live by that because I don't know. Do any of you guys have like a family member who's like always late for things and is never on time? Do you have this experience.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
mostly.
I don't know. I see this. My sister has it. It's like
She's always late.
We have to tell her to come to things like 2 hours early so she shows up on time.
Yeah. I think me being early to everything is an anxiety response.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I get really anxious about being late, so I'm early to everything.
Yeah. Wow. That's a good thing to be punctual, though. Anyways.
Yeah.
I don't know what this has to do with writing, but
I don't either. I had something in my head that I was going to say, but I don't remember what it was now.
It's marginally related.
it's margin. You know, I think time management is an important skill for a writer.
Yeah, lots of writers procrastinate.
Yeah, I do it.
No, definitely. I mean, that's not a thing. Like you really have to be good at managing your time. Like I'm on a schedule now. Like now that I'm not in school and not being forced to write, like I have to wake up and do it every damn day.
I know. Without structure. Like in the summer, I like just laid at home and did nothing for 3 months, and I was like, "What am I doing?"
Yeah.
And it's because without structure, I kind of fall apart.
No, it's
So
easy
it's
to
like-
it's easy to fall into that, and I think like a lot of writers say like, oh, the best way to like write is to like just do the thing,
Yeah.
and that's like widely true. Like you got to schedule that time, do it. I make sure I write for at least an hour every day,
Yeah.
and because I mean it's hard.
Yeah.
And like, I don't think it's easy for any writer to like sit down and do the thing.
Yeah. No.
Yeah. It's difficult and it sucks and it can be grueling and boring and not feel good. And I don't know if people realize that when they like get into writing.
Yeah.
Well, I was good at it for the first couple weeks of school, like maybe 2, and then like classes started to pick up, and then it started to like fall more toward the wayside, and now I haven't really been doing it for a couple of weeks.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And it's super annoying.
Yeah. And if you're a person with like other hobbies, it's easily like the last thing that you want to do.
Yeah. Oh man.
Do you write in the morning?
No. I have to like go out and like I have to get started because I'm a terrible morning person. I need my coffee. I need to get my body moving. So like I'll go for a walk. I go to the gym before I get that. Like I need to have all that stuff working and in motion before I can sit down and like get it out. You know what I mean? Because I'm naturally like an anxious person, like diagnosed like severe anxiety. So like my mornings are trouble. Like I wake up and I don't know like what the fuck is going on. I don't know like how I'm going to feel each morning. So I wake up and I need to like shake all that out for a couple hours and then I can sit down and do the thing.
Yeah.
It's amazing that you know like what to do and you've gotten a handle on it.
Yeah,
Lots of people have anxiety and they don't, and they stay in bed all day.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's something I dealt with forever. Like, I just was white knuckling this whole time, and like now that I'm in my mid to late 30s, like I barely figured out that I like needed help. You know what I mean? I thought like everyone felt this way. I was like, oh, nobody feels this way. Well, that's not true. There's a lot of people with anxiety out there.
Of course.
But like, I think I didn't realize that it wasn't normal. Like after like talking about it, therapy, medication, I was like, holy. Like, this is what normal people feel like. Like, they can just, like, function with their day. Like, they don't wake up in terror, you know?
Yeah.
And so figuring that out was, like, a huge thing and, like, really, really helped with, like, me getting to writing, you know, each day. Because otherwise it could be kind of paralyzing.
Yeah. Well, speaking of things that help writing, do you think being an editor, like, helped writing? Like, both the act of editing other people's work and also just the experience from that?
Absolutely. Yeah. That's been, like, one of the most instructive experiences of my life, like, editing for RipRap. One, because you get entries from all over the world. Like, you'll see when submissions open up, like, we were getting things from, like, Austria and Germany and, like, Spain. So, like, people see this stuff and, like, they just want their work to be seen. And, like, this isn't, like, high-level stuff. Like, people who have galleries open all over the world.
Wow.
Like, yeah, we came in to contact with, like, some pretty interesting, intense, and like really just like prolific artists who had been doing the thing for a long time, who had been in like, you know, widely read magazines, and like they were interested in being published in RipRap. And like to be exposed to that was kind of eye-opening and like humbling. We're like, oh, there's a lot of good writers out there, but also to see that they were interested in being part of a community and communicating and like you know, just to see that the reverence and respect that someone had for like something that just like seems like kind of small, you know? And like I think it's not small for some of these people, and I respected that. But being exposed to all that work, and I think you should read other people's work, and I especially your contemporaries, people in class. I think people should go out to readings and like hear what people are doing, because you just kind of take that in as a writer. And I think as writers, we're like constantly taking the world in, and that's a big part of it. Like realizing what people are doing now, you know, because we can, I think academically you can get stuck in the canon and like everyone wants to emulate what's like canon. But now it's like it's passé. Like nobody wants to read that anymore. So you need to really like keep up with what's going on now, what people are talking about. And I've written poems kind of trying to emulate like people I just heard like at open mics and stuff like that. It's like that was really interesting, and I really love what you did with that. So that was like getting those submissions in RipRap and reading through a lot of them. When I was a poetry editor, you read through about, I don't know, 500, 600 poems.
You got your work cut out for you, Peter.
And so just like going through that and like recognizing, I mean, everyone says it, but like recognizing the importance of that first line and being like kind of immediately taken by it. And like really understanding that like some work needs to grow on you, you know, and you're not going to spot it first off. And there was things that like I kind of rejected straight off the bat, and then realized, oh, this is kind of brilliant, you know what I mean? And I'm sure there's like probably a dozen poems that I rejected, but were actually like really probably pretty amazing, you know? So that's just something that you kind of have to live with as being an editor. But also it teaches you how to like grab someone's attention immediately, you know, how to be good at that. So I think it's definitely helped me in my own submission process and understanding what that's like, and like receiving a rejection letter and taking that in stride, because like, hey, like these people are reading a lot of work. You just got to be delusional and be like, they just like overlooked mine. You know what I mean? They probably just read mine too fast.
Got lost in the mail.
So it helped in several aspects.
I mean, like I don't know. I'm looking forward to editing, like to actually getting the submissions and filtering through them this year. But I haven't done anything like at the scale that you've done with this. But I think in just limited experience of just like doing like writing workshops, that is like the single thing that has improved my writing the most, just by looking at other people's writing and seeing how it functions, both like the stuff that isn't great and the stuff that is really great, because you can learn a lot from both. I don't know. I think, and then like when I first started, because writing's very new for me. I think I started when I was 23. We were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And, the first story I did was some crappy story about pirates. I like pirates as much as the next guy, okay, but it was terrible. And people tore into it, and then we looked at the other people's things and talked about them. And the next one, he's like, you know what? I'm gonna not do high concept shit because everyone who's doing the high concept thing about fantasy stuff, they're not great. And the people who aren't doing them, I'm really a lot more interested in those stories. So then I tried doing more grounded one. I'm like, oh wait, I actually am learning stuff about myself and writing this. I'm discovering oh wait, I like this grounded stuff. I can actually write about things that I'm thinking and feeling, and then I submit that and it gets good feedback.
So you had other people around you writing fantasy stories?
Yeah. It's
where were you?
David's class.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's David's class? Is that a fiction
Hernandez.
class?
It was intro to fiction.
I don't think I'm allowed to take that.
Yeah. Yeah. And then in the higher division courses, then I was going in with knowledge of what I like. So I just wrote better stuff and it kept getting better, but also just working with other people and their stuff and what they have and what's functioning and what isn't functioning about it, and looking at their stuff. And then once I do that, then I can go back to my own thing. I'm oh, this is wrong, that's wrong, this is wrong.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've had
No, definitely. Yeah. I think it's also an ego thing. I mean, none of us like to acknowledge it, but the ego is there. I think to be an artist, you have to have a pretty solid ego.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And deconstructing that and realizing, hey, I'm not really the best at this.
Yeah.
And you can really believe it when you spend too much time alone.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Because I think you do. Yeah, you do need an ego because you need some amount of confidence in your own.
No,
work.
absolutely.
Yeah,
you need to believe that your work is good enough to be out there and have its own life, and people are going to receive it well.
Yeah, and with ego comes a specific point of view and a specific vision and a specific voice.
Yeah. If you didn't have an ego, you'd just crumble and never send any work out.
You'd put out scientific papers.
Well, I mean, people who write scientific papers have egos too.
That's different.
But we read in Lisa's class this piece, and now I don't remember who wrote it, which sucks. But it was talking about how, when you're a writer, you have to be a mix of arrogance and insecurity. Because you're arrogant enough to think that, whatever you write is, deserving to be heard. But also, we all have our insecurities about, what I wrote sucks. But, what you write is who said what you write is supposed to be genius? That's so arrogant of you.
Yeah.
And so I definitely agree with the ego thing. For me, my writing always is so much better the more eyes gets on it.
Yeah.
Is when I'm in my own head, somebody's like, oh, well, I interpreted it that way. And it's well, I would never have known that because that's the way I intended it is a totally different way. And I love collaborating with other writers on my work, but I'm not as much a poet as the two of you are. So I write more fiction.
You might be.
Yeah. I think, and you don't know it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a little poetry because I think about. So I feel like I've always thought in metaphor.
Mm-hmm.
Even as a kid, I was oh, this thing is a lot like this thing. But I think that's what kids do when they're playing. You know what I mean? It's things are stand-in. I used to have a pickle jar that I would keep my figures in, and I was oh, that's that's a suspension chamber or whatever. You know what I mean? So your imagination is sort of always thinking in metaphors. This thing is this thing. So I think everyone has a little poem. And let's say you're a kid that had no imagination.
Yeah.
Which I guess they're out there.
That's brutal.
No. Yeah. I mean, these are both fiction and poetry. They're not that different at the end of the day. It's just different. I don't know. I feel in my mind,
I think it's easy for you to say that because you do both.
Yeah, I feel the way I think of it is prose is an extension of poetry. Where
it's the expansion pack.
Poetry is a very dense.
It is very dense.
It's like dough, right?
Yeah.
And fiction is like bread. There you go. That's a metaphor.
We're back
Boom.
to the bakery metaphors.
Right?
Love it.
Not to say, I guess that metaphor doesn't exactly work because fiction isn't, or prose isn't always a necessary offshoot of poetry. Poetry is its own thing. Prose is its own thing. But I feel I don't know. The way
I know what you're trying to say. There's poetry is not usually as long as prose.
Yeah.
So it's more dense and prose can be more diluted. you have more room to use sentences like Caesar was saying earlier. Not every sentence has to pack a huge punch. Some of them can just be a functional sentence without being like a musical sentence. I mean, I do also write poetry, but my poetry tends to be more like a screaming into the void type of poetry, whereas my prose is a lot more like calculated and strategical.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. Yeah, it's like the undistilled kind of. It's
Yes.
like the pure like kind of indulgent.
Yeah.
Like it's like eating the frosting.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yes.
I think that's good. Yeah. And a lot of
If we're going with the baking metaphor.
Yeah, that's a good.
We're always here for baking
Yeah.
metaphors.
Yeah, it's like licking the
Eating
frosting off the
cookie
cake.
dough. Yeah. Never gotten salmonella. Never.
No, I used to eat
It's made up.
those cookie doughs that you can
The-
just buy. Like,
Oh yeah,
Nestle
the tube.
Toll House.
It was more the Pillsbury
Pillsbury?
ones where you're supposed to like cut
Yeah.
them
The whole
yourself. We
thing?
just would just peel them open and eat them while we're
Oh,
walking home
for
from the
sure.
grocery store.
Yeah.
If it was unsafe, they wouldn't put it in ice cream.
Yeah, no,
Exactly.
it's great. I mean, as a kid, I would eat butter just straight up.
That's
I
tight.
ate a whole stick of butter when I was 10.
That's a little gross, Peter. But
It's okay.
I'm
I
happy
mean,
that you admitted that.
I turned out fine.
I mean, if you eat at restaurants, that's basically
Yeah,
what you're eating.
Right? It's butter. Butter makes it better.
You're eating
That
a
is
stick
so
of butter in
true.
your pasta.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. Here's another question that I think could be good.
Let's do it.
What motivated you to want to join RipRap / what advice do you have for newer writers? We can break that up.
Okay, motivated me to want to join RipRap. I'm like highly interested in publishing, and like because like it was like kind of a mystery to me, and
Yeah.
submission is like such a tough process, and if you don't know about it, it could be like really isolating and
Very.
alienating. And like I've always been a person that's been on the outside. None of my family is in the arts or anything. I don't know how it works on the inside, so I was really interested in like getting that perspective and actually finding writers too, because it's also hard to find community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it could be like a mystery. And so like to me, RipRap was a way of like finding my way inside of that world. And like, like just finding a place in it and like solidifying my place in it. And so when I first got there, the first day I was like, I want to be poetry editor. Like no experience at all. And like, luckily my friend Kiana, who was running it, she wasn't my friend at the time. Like this wasn't like nepotism or anything.
No.
She's just like, you got it. I was like, okay, perfect. But I think she saw like how excited I was about it. And she's like,
Oh,
yeah,
for sure.
yeah, for sure. Go
Yeah.
for it. So I think it was like community, and I think like community is important when you're a writer to like keep you going and to like realize other people are doing like this silly little thing too. And like I don't mean to minimize it, but it's kind of a silly thing to like sit around
Yeah.
and like write funny little poems. You know what I mean? Especially me, like my poems are just like kind of they're just kind of cheeky.
Kinda silly.
Yeah. So I think number one was like figuring out what was going on behind the scenes. And two was just like, where's that community? Where can I find writers? I was just really interested in reading other people's stuff outside of workshop, because as helpful as workshop can be, it's like a really insular thing.
Yeah.
And like you can only like we have our own brains and our own frame of references.
Yeah.
That just becomes an extension of that, and they
Yeah.
only know what they know. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Workshop can only get so big, and you can write a poem, something outside of like the scope of anything. Like if I wrote a poem, let's say video games, because I'm super into video games. So
Yeah.
like if I wrote a poem about video game, there's no other gamers in the class. They're not going to get that point of reference. You know what I mean?
As a fellow gamer.
100%.
Yeah, exactly. But that poem would have wings outside of the workshop, you know?
Yeah.
So there is a little insularity in a workshop too, and you have to like take all those things with a grain of salt. Like your workshop
Yeah.
only knows so much as well. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We're only working with so much information and like a frame of reference. So it's good to find community outside of that, because there are all different kind of writers there.
Yeah.
And I think a workshop does have a tendency to draw a certain type of person, and that's a person like, who sees himself as an artist and an academic and like that. And that's like a certain type of person. And as far as like new writers, my advice with like anything when you're starting something new is like just stick with it. Like
Yeah.
stick with the thing. Like I tell young people this all the time. I tell my nieces and nephews and cousins. I was like, just pick a thing and stick with it. Like keep on doing it. You know, like if I had like stuck with anything that I started in high school, I would be really good at it. By this time. You know.
Yeah.
So I think like stick with it, and you're going to get better. Like you're always getting better. I read stuff that I wrote a year ago, and I'm better than that now.
That's amazing.
And I've been doing this a long time by now, you know.
Yeah.
And so I think just like persistence and tenacity, and like, you know, build your confidence. Read things out loud. Listen to your own voice. I mean, your voice especially. I used to hate my voice. I thought I had a lisp. I don't know. But I would record myself on audio messages on my phone for hours, and then I would play it back just to like get used to the sound of my own voice. And so like I think it's important to like build confidence, because I think poetry is supposed to be read.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, so I think it's important to like build confidence in your like literal voice, and then like your writing voice.
Yeah. That's an interesting point about like poetry being read specifically by like the author. I think, in my opinion, because like if you think about it, that's like the structure of the poem, the line breaks, the punctuation. That kind of what that's doing is informing how you read it.
Absolutely.
And that's kind of just conveying, as the author, to the next reader, this is how you read it aloud.
Yeah.
So,
but being read by the author, I think, is like the one true way it's meant to be read. It's like
authentic.
It's like, you know, when like a composer writes, sure. It's like when a composer writes like a piece of music, like they have it in their head exactly how it's supposed to sound, and like it's the one true way.
Yeah.
I think it's a lot like reading a poem. Like the way I read a poem, one of my poems, it's definitely not the way somebody else did it, because like I just have like this awkward, stilted way of talking sometimes, especially when reading. And I think like that's like the only time you're going to hear it.
Yeah,
that way, you know.
I remember I heard at the RipRap party last year. I was there, and I heard you read one of your works, and I remember enjoying it. I don't remember what it was about, but I remember enjoying it.
Oh, cool! Thanks. Good takeaway.
I love that.
Yeah.
Speaking of writing voice, the last question that's on here is: how would you describe your writing voice, and how did it cultivate into what it is now?
My writing voice is kind of like I said, a little bit cheeky, sardonic. There's like a tiny bit of sentimentality. I really like towing the line of sentimentality, because I really like sentimental things. Like I'm like a sentimental person, and I love just towing that line of like, ooh, that's that could be a little sentimental. I guess that's the word for it.
Yeah. Kind of cheesy, or
sort
like
of corny,
Hallmarky.
or like a little, almost like that, or like just kind of like really manipulating the reader to like feel something. I really like towing the line of sentimentality, but I've gotten a little far away from that. I used to write really like flowery, heavy metaphor stuff, but as of late, I just like am interested in presenting the reader with a thing, like maybe a person or a place, and kind of letting them work out their own feelings about it. And like I'll like insert a point of view, but I'm like really interested in letting the reader sit with this character or in this place, and letting them like kind of feel that thing out a little bit, and like, you know, allowing them to come to their own conclusions about a thing. And so like my writing has become like, interestingly, like more simple.
Yeah.
And I think I've like been going in this direction of simplicity, and like just saying the thing that I mean to say, like using really basic sentences, which is an interesting thing, because I kind of like veered away from prose because my writing was like a little too flowery and complex for prose. But I think I'm like veering in the other direction now.
You think you might try prose? Knowing what you know about your voice changing?
It's always been in my life, and I'll do prose every now and then. But like to like dedicate a lot of time to it, like not yet. I want to get this first book out, and then maybe work on a novel. Yeah. But once this first book is out, like maybe I'll think about returning to that, because I also like I write plays too.
Oh. Wow. And
so
that's a whole different thing.
Yeah, I was writing plays for, so like I like just like love writing in all its forms. So I don't know what's next after this book gets out, but like prose is definitely an option.
Yeah. Well, speaking of like making your like writing more simple, I think that's very admirable, because I think honestly some of the best writing, both poetry, prose, whatever, is usually pretty simple and direct. And I think, I don't know, I mean, like brevity is like the soul of wit or whatever.
Yeah.
Right, where it's really difficult to make something simple and impactful. But if you do it, there's no better way to do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. And like it's funny because I think in my taste, like what I seek outside of myself is not like simple work. Like I do enjoy like heavy-handed metaphor and like really compelling images.
Yeah.
But it's just like what comes out of me when I sit down and write it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think what you seek and what you produce can be different.
Yeah. I think there's also like things you read for different reasons or write for different reasons.
Absolutely.
Like sometimes the poems I write, I'm not doing it to like have any meaning. I'm doing it just because I want to do wordplay.
Yeah.
And rhymes.
No, that's fun.
So some like they read really fun. They're not necessarily about anything, but
Yeah.
they get to use like words like defenestrate or things like that.
Yeah. It's good to not lose that sense of play
Yeah.
when writing,
For sure.
especially with poetry, because we get to be playful.
Yeah.
And to me, it's like kind of mischievous to like break up language in ways that people don't usually see. And I'm like, I like being a little like mischievous.
Yeah.
Like I
It's
like
fun.
being like.
It's funny. Yeah. I think. Yeah.
That's part of why I like poetry too.
Yeah, and it's honestly also being like mischievous or fun or cheeky or whatever. It's hard to be funny in writing.
Yeah.
Also, so when you see it, it's like, whoa, that's like pretty funny. Like I like comedy. We're not comedic books and authors. Like I've been reading Confederacy of Dunces.
Oh yeah,
which
great
is
book.
like super funny. Or like when I was a kid, my favorite books were like the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy books. The Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams.
Yeah.
Who has like all this like very, I mean, I guess it was dated in British, but I didn't get everything.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
It's all very like, I don't know, tongue-in-cheek, sarcastic.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I one of the first authors I got into was Vonnegut.
Yeah.
I think he's like still hilarious.
Yeah.
And just his point of view and a little sardonic. I think I got a lot of my sensibilities from Vonnegut.
Yeah. I don't know.
That's funny. I'm like well known as like a comedy hater. I
love that
don't
for
like
you.
stand up.
Yeah.
The problem is that I find it unfunny when people try really hard to be funny.
Yeah.
And so
That's a true thing.
I love it in those books that you guys are talking about, like Vonnegut and The Hitchhiker's Guide and stuff like that, where they're just kind of like being playful and like being a little bit silly and not taking themselves so seriously.
Yeah.
And then it comes off really hilarious.
Yeah.
But I know that like Diary of a Wimpy Kid, like I feel like it's trying too hard.
I never read it, but
really make me
I can imagine.
laugh. Yeah.
I find them quite pedestrian.
Yeah. No, that's a good word, Peter.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
But I like subtle, witty humor. That really gets me. So I don't go see comedies like at the movies because Adam Sandler like falling into a pie isn't like the peak of comedy for me.
That will always be funny to
I
me.
like Happy Gilmore.
It's probably, yeah.
That's totally okay. I like roasted stand up to one of the other MFA students
Yeah.
and they were just like, "You're not my friend anymore."
I've only gone to see stand up twice. Once because my sister was doing it, and then another time I went with my girlfriend and another friend, and it was at like the comedy. What was it, the Laugh Factory in Hollywood?
Yeah.
And Craig Robinson, he's Daryl from The Office. He was the closing act. So it was like an hour of like comedians, and they were not very good. And then he came on, and like he set up for like 10 minutes. He was playing a song and setting up a piano because he does like music with it. And he didn't like have any jokes written. He was just like doing audience work, and he stayed up there. He got on at midnight. He stayed up there till 2 a.m. waiting, and people would just trickle out and leave. So we were like, there was only 8 people there by the end, and there's this one woman in the front row who kept like gabbing to him, thinking she was funny, but it was like he was making fun of her, and she didn't realize it. And she was really annoying, and everyone was laughing at her. It was terrible. But I got a picture with him. It was fun.
Well, it's like performance art.
Yeah, it kind of was. but it went through cycles of being funny and not funny.
Yeah.
And painful.
Yeah. That's hard to do.
I don't know. So, stand-up comedy.
I just think I get a lot of secondhand embarrassment.
Yeah.
And I think that's why I don't find it funny when people are trying really hard to be funny. Instead, I'm just cringing for them.
Yeah, I think I feel more secondhand embarrassment than actual embarrassment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No. 100%.
I don't know. I get secondhand embarrassment really bad. If we're like watching TV and it's like I have to leave the room.
Yeah.
It's gonna happen.
I'm going to go cringe in the bathroom.
Yeah, that's bad. Oh man. All right, we're almost at an hour here. Do we have one final question?
We have like more questions. By the last question, I just meant like it was the final question on the page.
Oh,
like
yeah.
the most
yeah.
lately submitted one, but
Ask away.
there's like a bunch more. You can choose again, Peter. You can scroll up or down. I think there's a couple.
Let's see. Here's one. How is literature present in your everyday life?
Oh, well, I think for all of it, like readers, like you got to read,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So like I'm constantly reading, and that's always been a fact for me. And I think that's like the one true thing. I think even more than like writing, like
Oh, yeah,
you need to
100%.
read.
Yeah.
And I think that like reading has like largely shaped who I am as a person, and like just kind of like my personality is all from books. Or
Yeah.
like, I
Yeah.
mean, like movies probably too, but
Yeah.
like mostly from books. Like I just built myself around these characters in books. I mean, like I want to be more like that. Or like, from reading John Steinbeck, I like learned that, like that those books are about like brotherhood and like being together at the bottom and raising each other up. And like a lot of like my worldview was formed by reading like East of Eden and Grapes of Wrath. And like I think if you're going to be a serious writer, you need to be a serious reader, and like that's how I live my life. So it's present in that sense. It's present in the sense that like I stay writing, and it's like my lifeblood, and I need to do it. Even though it could be hard sometimes, but like I think when you're a person who like feels a lot of things, waking up can be hard too.
Yeah.
So it's present in that sense. I don't know. I think that like I can't remember who like coined the term like the literary life. But like I try to live the literary life and preach those things and talk to people about those things and engage in those things and like and kind of like point out how these things are like relevant and alive in daily life, and it helps with critical thinking too, and like really seeing the world for what it is and how it works. Yeah,
well, because like literature, like most art, is a reflection of the world, right? And so you're just getting it reflected back at you, and you're absorbing it piece by piece all the time, and that helps you, I guess, grow with the world. At least that's how I see it, kind of.
Yeah, I mean, best case scenario, yes. I think that's happening less and less nowadays. But I think I say less and less because I'm not sure the world is growing anymore.
Everyone's always on their phones.
No, I mean, it's funny that, well, not funny. It's wonderful that you said that about being a reader, Caesar, because I feel like my personality and I would not be who I am without the books that I read as a kid, especially as a teen. And that's what made me want to be a writer. I was like, oh my gosh, if I can do this for someone someday, like I'll have done it. Like this is all I want.
Absolutely.
Ever in the world. And I'm a YA writer, so my big goal is to like write books that have like positive role models to like help teens, because being a teen was really difficult for me. And I read a lot of books about a lot of teens and young people who helped me be like, okay, like I'm not alone feeling all of the teenage angst and all the confusion and identity conflicts that come with starting to go from a kid to an adult. And I don't know, I think I'd be a lot sadder if I hadn't read the books that really helped me feel comforted. So I was like, if I can do that for somebody someday, that'll just be it. Yeah. And that's what made me decide to be a novelist. But so yeah, I love that you say that as a writer, you are just totally shaped by what you read and that you continue to read. I think that all writers should read. What are you reading, Peter?
Captain Underpants.
Right now.
I'm just kidding.
Diary of a Wimpy Kid.
No, I mentioned it earlier. I'm reading Confederacy of
Oh,
Dunces.
you did say that, yes.
And then I just got it. I've been meaning to read it a while, but I got Catch-22. So
Nice.
I'll read that next.
Mm-hmm.
That book sounds
But-
good. I still haven't read it.
Yeah. Well, that's about an hour. So
All right.
I'm just going to say, do you want to say any last things? Do you want any upcoming projects you want to shout out for yourself?
No, just I'm in like kind of the editing stages of his book, and I'm gonna ship it off to a chapbook contest and see who will publish
Woohoo!
it. Other than that, like I'm really excited for what's happening with RipRap. It seems
Yeah.
like fresh new faces, and everyone's like really going for it. And
Yeah.
I'm excited for this and to see what you guys turn out.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You'll
Well,
have to send us your work, you
Yeah.
know, later.
No,
You can
absolutely.
post it on the RipRap page.
Yeah,
And
yeah, that would be great.
The
Also-
Regulars was the name of this book you're working on?
The Regulars.
All right,
yeah,
keep an eye out for
yeah,
that.
we are looking out.
yeah, definitely.
All right, cool. Well, thank you for being here
Thanks
today.
for having me, guys. I really appreciate this.
Of
This
course.
was such a
Yeah,
fun
we
first
appreciate it.
episode.
Yeah, this is great. I can't wait to hear more of them.
All righty. Well, that has been Rip Rap Yap, the inaugural episode. Stay tuned for next time, and have a good day.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.